let you know we're going to be recording this. And I want to thank all of the co-sponsors that graciously made this possible. If we can go to the next slide, please. I would like to, in particular, thank San Juan, the Sierra Club San Francisco Bay Chapter, and the Sierra Club Northern Alameda County Group, and the Citizens Climate Lobby of Alameda County. We have a super exciting panel for you all today, and there's going to be ample opportunity to ask questions. The way we're going to be asking questions today is to put them in the chat. If you can do it in chat to everyone mode, and Devin is going to get to as many questions as he possibly can. And speaking of Devin, I just wanted to tell you all what an awesome friend and colleague Devin is. He's a technologist, climate justice activist, and serves as of 2020 as a member of the Pinole City Council. Professionally, he leads DTM Strategies, a cutting-edge digital media company at the intersection of technology, racial justice, and electoral politics. Most recently, he managed the California League of Conservation Voters digital communications and technology team. We had a lot of fun together doing all sorts of intersectional work. And in 2017, he was appointed as a Technology and Democracy Fellow by the Harvard Ash Center for Democratic Governance and Innovation. Devin serves on numerous boards, including MCE Clean Energy, where recently he took a vote that made a big difference and was the deciding vote on a key issue that advanced rooftop solar. He also serves as my successor on the Young Democrats of America Environmental Caucus and National Committee person of the California Young Democrats. Uh, I met Devin over a decade ago. Devin is an SF native. He has a dynamic education background, graduating from UCLA with a degree in Afro-American studies and also studying in Cuba and Brazil. And when he's not working, he loves spending time with his puppy Miles, who is incredibly cute, as well as his nieces and nephews. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to my brother, Devin.
Thank you, Igor, so much. And it's so great to be here. And thank you, young professionals in energy, for just hosting this conversation. I'm so excited to get to the panelists. So I'm just going to jump right in and introduce them. But again, thank you for being here. And I'm sure we're going to have a great conversation today. First and foremost, I wanted to introduce someone who I see both as a role model, but also just as a justice warrior, Andres Soto, who's the Richmond organizer with Communities for a Better Environment, a statewide environmental justice organization. Andres has spent his adult life dedicated to fighting the status quo of American society in several areas of injustice. Living most of his life in Richmond and now in Benicia, Andres has been a zealous advocate for language minority communities, youth violence prevention and gun control, police accountability, and political enfranchisement. He is the co-founder of the Richmond Progressive Alliance, and in 2012, he became a Richmond organizer for CBE. 6 days later, Chevron blew up. And since then, he's been instrumental in helping to start and participate in Richmond Our Power Coalition, the Sunflower Alliance, Protect the Bay Coalition, the Refinery Action Coalition, and of course, Venetians for a Healthy and Safe Community. Andres has served on the Richmond AB 617 Community Emissions Reduction Program design team. And he's also been a consistent presence at many public agency meetings, articulating the position of and on behalf of environmental justice communities, speaking truth to power. Andres, how's it going this evening?
Actually, it's going really well so far,
Awesome.
and I'm glad to be here with everybody and all these heavy hitters, including yourself.
Wonderful. Well, what I'll do is I'll start the first question with you, but I'm going to get to the rest of the panelists and give some time to do their introductions as well. But thank you for being here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation this evening.
Thank you. You too.
Of course. The next panelist is Jessica Tovar, who's a longtime environmental justice community organizer herself. She now works with the local Clean Energy Alliance for Energy Democracy. She grew up in housing projects near a heavy industrial pollution corridor in East Los Angeles. And that experience led her to focus on preventing and reducing local industrial pollution and advocating for policies that protect vulnerable communities. In the Bay Area, she helped shut down the PG&E Hunters Point power plant. A shout out to Hunters Point in Bayview, that's where I'm from, in 2004. And in 2010, she successfully mobilized against the tar sands dirty crude expansion of the Chevron Richmond Oil Refinery. She promotes equity and clean energy as the coordinator of the East Bay Clean Power Alliance, which has advanced local clean energy solutions by establishing community choice program. East Bay Community Energy, a public energy services provider agency that is now providing electricity for over 1.5 million people in Alameda County. That's really incredible. The local Clean Energy Alliance is jumpstarting a just transition with a local development business plan, a Green New Deal for Alameda County with net revenues from East Bay Community Energy. And as of 2019, they have won $5.1 million towards advancing clean energy programs and projects to build community energy resilience and wealth. And that is crucial to needing to bring the model, which is clean power to the people. Jessica, how's it going this afternoon?
Great, thank you.
Thanks for being here. Did I miss anything?
No, you got it.
I'm so glad. Thanks for being here. I'm looking forward to chatting with you.
There's a lot more money. It's beyond 5.6 million at this
Oh,
point.
listen, bring on the money where the money resides, please. All right, we're going to come back to you, Jessica. I'll be right back. Jose, how's it going?
It's going well, going well.
Good. Well, Jose, it's so great to have you here. For those of you who don't know Jose, he is the Building Decarbonization Coalition California Director. Jose worked at the California Environmental Justice Alliance as the Energy Equity Program Manager, where he worked to build a more equitable and democratic energy system for working families. Before venturing into the nonprofit space, Jose worked at the California Energy Commission, Office of Governmental Affairs, and both at the California State Assembly and the Senate. His career in public service started as a California Senate fellow in the office of then Senator Alex Padilla, State Senator Alex Padilla, not to be confused with our US Senator now, although those are the same person. Jose is proud to come from a working class immigrant family that continues to drive his passion to fight for a clean and equitable future. In his free time, he likes to screenwrite social and political dramas. I love dramas. Hike and listen to live music. Pretty awesome. And Jose, it's so great to have you and looking forward to this conversation this evening.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm flattered and humbled to be on the panel with such great people.
Absolutely. And I didn't see Miss Margaret. Is Miss Margaret on?
I think she is just finishing up another event, so maybe she can be introduced a little later.
No worries. We'll have her, and we are so lucky to have Miss Margaret. And just so folks know, Miss Margaret is the co-founder and co-director of the West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project. For more than a decade, she has tirelessly devoted herself to improving the quality of life for residents of West Oakland. Her numerous collaborative efforts have resulted in tangible improvements that have led to safer jobs, schools, and of course, homes. Ms. Margaret's expertise has earned her many awards and roles in a number of local and state advisory boards and steering committees, including the California Environmental Health Tracking Project, Alameda County Pilot Project, the West Oakland Project Area Committee, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District's Community Air Risk Evaluation Program, the Cabinet Level Goods Movement Working Group, and of course, the California Air Resources Board Environmental Justice Advocacy Committee. Advisory Committee. And we're so excited to have Miss Margaret when she does join us. But until then, we'll get started and certainly would love to hear some of the thoughts from our panelists. And so again, thank you to the viewers who are here today. I believe we had over 100 RSVPs for this event. So obviously this is something important to our community. And of course, those of you who came know that today's conversation is about putting the justice in just transition. Putting the justice in just transition. And where that word justice comes from is a term that many of us know, right? But some of us don't. And I think it's important for us to set the tone for this conversation tonight about the vision for environmental justice and what that means. And so my first question is actually to one of our panelists, Andres. I'd like to ask you, you've done so much tremendous work, many panelists here have done, but I'm wondering, what is your vision for environmental justice and what does that look like?
Well, to me, the whole question of environmental justice hinges first on the justice, and that what we know as environmental injustice in the daily lives of so many of our people is really just a reflection of the broader injustices that are baked into not only US society, but global society. So from that picture, it means diminishing the negative health impacts from industry, deindustrialization, or potentially reindustrialization, and decarbonization. But it also extends to so many other things. Living in a community like Richmond, when we talk about a just transition, we in our Richmond Our Power Coalition, we have people who are dealing with housing rights. We have people who are dealing with the reentry population, because we see the prison industrial complex as an extractive economy that's impacting our community. We have people who are dealing with immigrants' rights and the basic issues of the refinery and Chevron and its impact on our politics, our political economy. When we look at the people who support Chevron's politics in our community, such as the Chamber of Commerce, such as the Council of Industries, such as the Richmond Police Officers Association, the Richmond Firefighters Association, we know this is the alliance that exists throughout communities that are working against the interests of the people who are most impacted by this industrial pollution. So to that end, it's really part and parcel to a much broader shift in the paradigm of what we view as justice. And that means taking the money from the rich and redistributing it to everybody else. Yeah. So I'll stop there.
No, listen, we're just getting started, so please don't stop. That's great. And I just, as you mentioned that, I also want to finally welcome Miss Margaret. Thank you for being here. We did read your bio out loud. I think many of us were applauding either through Zoom or really in our rooms. So thanks for being here. We are so excited to have you in conversation. How's it going this afternoon?
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
This is Ms. Margaret Gordon, West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project.
Great to have you. Our next question is, I was going to ask Jessica too. We talk a lot about just transition and we talk about justice, right? And your work has been centered around both, providing the actual service of electricity to folks, but in that, I'm sure there's a lot of jobs that you're helping to cultivate. The question I have for you is, how would you explain the just transition framework, and how does this relate to the work that you do specifically, or the work of your organization?
Sure.
Sorry, excuse me, who's speaking? I'm sorry, I am partially blind because I had eye surgery, and I need people to say who's speaking.
Oh, absolutely, Miss Margaret. This is Devin Murphy. I'm the moderator for the event tonight and also a council member. And I will do better at making sure that I say who's speaking. Right now, I was asking Jessica, one of the panelists from for tonight's panel. She is from the local clean.
Okay, can you start back again? Your name again?
Sure. Absolutely.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
No worries. I'm Devin Murphy.
All right.
Yep. And I'm right now, Jessica is going to be answering one of our questions, and Jessica is from the local Clean Energy Alliance.
Hi, Jessica.
We know each other. Yeah, so really what we've really been advocating for is creating job opportunities, specifically clean energy jobs. And it isn't just about, solar, battery storage installation. I mean, there's so much when it comes to clean energy jobs, especially around energy efficiency. There's a lot of work there. And as well as creating those job opportunities within community choice programs, and call centers. I mean, there's all kinds of positions within that, but really trying to emphasize that we need to create these jobs, but that the jobs need to go to folks of color, folks from the community, folks from communities that have been disinvested for so long, and that includes the environmental justice community. And there's a lot of work still to be done there. To be very clear about that, is that we're still trying to advance more of our communities within this framework. And part of that is really, we're in the works of advocating for that still. Um, so I'll just emphasize that. But I mean, there's so much within. You mentioned the local development business plan, which is really a plan for how to rely less on market purchase energy and create job opportunities over time here at home in our built environment, as opposed to outsourcing those jobs to remote, solar farms or remote wind farms, for example, which are really utility scale, owned and run by the utilities. PG&E is a good example, and their track record really is that of a serial killer. Nobody is trusting them at this point because they are responsible for a lot of fires, and that's because that transmission wire system that they own is old and not being kept up. And
Right.
so I think, we're in an era where we've learned from our mistakes, and we want to say and what this new energy system looks like. So
Right.
that's really where the just transition comes in, and it includes people that look like you and me. And we, let's be clear, like the clean energy system really has been dominated by old white straight males, and that is changing, and we need to really change it. And so, we're stepping into that new time. So
It's
I'll
a new
stop there.
time. It's a new day, and we're not going anywhere, right? I mean, the failures of the past are things that we're going to acknowledge and also address, and that's what I'm hearing from you. We're not going to let them die down. We have to hold folks accountable. I would like to ask you a follow up, Jessica, and also want to extend to other panelists, but I'd ask, what do you think the biggest failure of the clean energy industry is in terms of environmental justice and what could be done?
hmm I can't help but hone in on the term industry, right? I
Mm,
mean, really, the capitalist system is designed for, if you can afford it and you own it, you can buy it, right? And so we're living in a system where people, and poor people, people of color, environmental justice communities, and are really have been disinvested, right?
mm,
And so really we need to emphasize a lot more investment in our communities.
mm,
That's really what needs to happen.
absolutely.
And that means it's not just about putting solar on somebody's home that they own. It's about, solarizing. For example, I grew up in housing projects. It would be great if our housing projects had solar, and
Yep.
then the folks that live in these housing projects don't have to pay for energy, or pay a lot less, because communities like mine have been living in energy poverty for way too long. I mean, the debt has been scary. Power shutoffs are devastating. And
Yeah.
we're living right now in a time where, as a result of COVID, there's billions of dollars worth of debt that's been accumulated in the state of California alone. This is a national issue,
Yeah.
um, just to highlight that.
Absolutely. And thank you for mentioning the focus around communities, right? We say that term a lot. I was so excited to see the work you've done in Hunters Point. As I mentioned, that's where I'm from originally. I'm a council member in Pinole, but I'm San Francisco bred, born and raised. But I say that because we oftentimes use the term community, but we don't say who those communities are. And I do want to come back to you, Jessica, but I wanted to ask Miss Margaret, if you would be so willing to answer my next question, which is about those communities, and the issues, more importantly, that those communities are dealing with. What are some current issues in your own community or the communities that you're working in California, that you can highlight for us so that folks on the call understand really the degree of what we're talking about?
Okay, but we have to start. Okay,
Yes,
My name is Ms. Margaret Gordon. I've been doing environmental justice work for over 50 years. I am a native of the Bay Area. I'm 74 years from Richmond to Hollis Point to West Oakland. And prior to that, starting from 1865 as a starting point when Black people in Texas understood there was the exclamation proclamation had happened to free the slaves. And then from that, what Reconstruction brought to people's freedom. And then looking at going forward, the trials and tribulation of Jim Crow, civil rights into 1965. Then we start looking at 2021. How much difference is it? How much difference is it? Yes, we able to have these type of events, have the discussion, clarification, being specified, being having intent, deliberation, how to look at a lot of these systems have been in place going back from 1865 to 1965 to now are still being generated externally, internally, inside and outside that say Black people, women, people of color are not able to have the ability to have the power for transition. And based on our past 4 years, the president we had definitely said we didn't matter. But with this new president, Biden, we do matter. We do matter because we pulled a lot of plugs out of being stopped to get him in office. And we still have not, as the progressives, been able to join together to say, what is the pathway? What is the navigation to say that we're going to have equity, economic equity, and environmental justice?
right.
And that should be on this table right now. And how we be in more including to stop the excluding of who is sitting at the table, not to be an advisor, not for input, not for feedback, but make a decision about how reshaping those who have not been able to be in the position that for the discussion, for the dialogue, for the conversation, and making decisions.
Yeah.
That's the part that we has not been answered as the progressives of understanding how do we move forward, because we have not utilized the practice of the past to move forward as historical of things we should not be doing. And we still have such segregation amongst ourselves. Let's be really clear. There is segregation amongst ourselves. Where I live, who works, what county, what city you work in, what part of a city you live in, and the impacts and your vulnerabilities from conditions that say that you impacted or you vulnerable. And those clarifications from the progressives have not been certified, have not been a place-making solution or resolution or solving issues, how we move forward. So I'm in hopes, my in hopes was having this, bringing to this event today, those unanswered conversations that fear people are fearful of having, especially when you get down, when you have an organization like the Sierra Club, who have in the past, as part of their foundation, put animals in front of people impacts and vulnerabilities over the human communities, especially communities of Black, brown, poor, white, Asian, American Indian, Southeast Asian over the years. So there's a lot of work that has to be done, and not to make people feel guilty, but to inspire people to understand where are you going to place the resources, the infrastructure, capacity, funding, and investment, inventory, infrastructure, leadership, all those things that say that should be part of being a progressive.
Right.
And that has not, those things have not been part of the conversation.
Yeah. Miss Margaret, thank
You
you.
know, we have not been able to have that conversation.
Yeah. And I completely agree with you. And you said something earlier about just, I think you said racial equity, gender equity, and environmental equity, or environmental
and economic equity.
Economic equity. Thank you. And it brings me, because again, I know I've heard both you and some of the other panelists talk about Hunters Point and West Oakland and Richmond, right? These environmental justice communities, or these, some refer to them as frontline communities, around their lack. I mean, these communities are led by Democrats often, right? Or progressives sometimes. But we still haven't got to the heart of addressing the issues. That's what I'm hearing from you.
Yes, we still have those. We don't know how to get past those challenges and those barriers. Yeah. You're saying that when you talk about just transition,
yeah,
you want to talk about just transition, but who are you talking about for just transition?
Right. Yeah. Who should we be talking about, Miss Margaret?
Who we should be talking about as encompass of the overall community, and those who have been left out of just transition.
Yeah.
It's different from this. As a difference for me, for somebody to live in the hill area, to have a certain level of air quality, and then you get down to the waterline, people live close to the waterline or the shoreline, that's a different level of air quality. Yeah. And we have progressives sitting on the city council, are being in place in government, who do not have the ability to tell staff. We're working from a place of health,
yeah,
public health, inclusion, and that we should have the equity that was our children, our seniors, our people who are impacted at the same level of air quality.
Absolutely. Miss Margaret.
Okay. Oh. We do not have, we got a lot of people running their mouths saying this, but they have not put it to action. We have a lot of people want to put this to talk about it, but do not know how to be about it. Mm-hmm. That's the bottom line.
Absolutely.
Talking about it and being about it is two different things.
Yeah. And Miss Margaret, I want to bring Jose into this conversation, because I think this is very important, and this is why we're talking about this today, right? Because we have to transition from from talking about it to being about it. And Miss Margaret, you've done this work for decades. You are a true trailblazer in environmental justice. And
no, I'm gonna say this here as my nieces, my grandnieces, Miss Auntie Margaret is that bitch. She's always bitching about something that's gonna give us a leg up, not a leg down.
Absolutely.
All
Absolutely.
right. And I'm just, and let's really clarify
Yeah.
That many of us, even on this, on this Zoom call, really do not understand about when I say not just talking about being about it,
Right.
because we live in such silos and enclosures that do not give them the ability to come out of their fear factors.
Yeah. Yeah. We got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. We have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And the fears that seems like a lot of folks have around justice have to be said out loud and put in our faces several times. And I think it's so important that this call is linking those who have been doing this work for a long time. And those of us, and I include myself, who are just getting started and have to carry on really the so much that you all have done. And I include Andres in this as well, that you all have done, Jessica, you all have done, Jose, you all have done to really push us forward. And Jose, I wanted to bring you in because I heard Ms. Margaret say something that I thought was really important about this kind of notion that the progressives in office, the liberals in office, are pushing us forward. And you've done an incredible job, both at the California Environmental Justice Alliance, but you've also worked with elected officials. And I'm sure environment and climate justice and environmental justice has been an issue. But my question is supplement to kind of what Miss Margaret has kind of opened up, which is about, you know, how we bridge the gap, right? How do we bridge the gap between, you know, radicalism and what people say is, oh my gosh, this is too much. And this idea of pragmatism of just doing enough, right? And not maybe doing all you can do, but doing what's possible. A lot of folks on this call are organizers and industrial professionals and city council people like myself, right? And we're thinking about these solutions, but some of us get lost. My question to you is, how can organizers and industrial professionals work together to advance environmental justice?
Yeah, definitely a difficult question. And I'll say I'm humbled and to be following Margaret Gordon in such a good panel.
Yeah.
In terms of, you know, radicalism or just pragmatism, it's a matter of perspective, of course, and that sounds, kind of obvious, right, when you say it like that. But what I mean by that is, um, Ms. Margaret Gordon said a lot of things, right, in terms of like that are relevant to this question that I have to pick up on and kind of elevate, right, because I think it's important to learn from your elders and those who have done the work, Soto, Jessica, and others. And I think it's the ability to communicate and uplift and center those voices that aren't heard is an important piece in kind of breaking down what's pragmatic and what's radical, right? Because often what I found is what folks find pragmatic is through their point of view, right? And we all have points of views. We all have some way of understanding the world, whether it's through our education, right? Whether it's through our degrees or whether it's through our life experiences and our education or a combination of all of the above. So I think in order to bridge those gaps, it's important to center and really uplift and empower. By empower, I mean seed power sometimes, right? Which is the difficult part to those that haven't been there to try to put the answers together. Because until we do that, then there's a challenge of solving for those issues that we so long for. And not having the people in the room that are experiencing, right, kind of the environmental injustice. I think to get even more specific about kind of what that looks like, when you're looking at an energy issue, often, right, there's been approaches that come from, carbon and, green perspective, which is understandable in a lot of ways, right? Climate change is a threat to everyone. But at the same time, for a lot of folks, so is homelessness, so is gun violence, so it's all of the above. So I think being able to manage all those issues in that intersection is why environmental justice, at least to me, is such a empowering and powerful way to see the world, because you're trying to bring that intersection together and really design a policy.
Yeah.
Right. Design a policy that not only thinks about, Mother Earth and kind of how to address those issues that the energy industry is trying to take on, but also tries to dismantle the problems that got us there in the first place. And I think in order to put that together, you really have to have those honest conversations. And that means understanding how many megawatts we need to hit our reliability goals, but at the same time, asking of the people that don't have solar, don't have these technologies, how do we get them to you? What kind of technology? How should they function? So a policy like time of use. How do you make that easy to use so it's not unjust, right? Can it ever not be unjust, right? And I think these are the questions that we need to really think about and ask. And the job of the industry professionals, I think, is to be able to break that down and present issues um, in a way that everyone can discuss them, because the community has not a lot of knowledge, right? And in order to communicate effectively, we have to be able to speak to each other like like people.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said. And I want to thank folks in the
Can I ask a question, please?
Miss Margaret, you can ask me anything, but we have so many questions for you. So yes, please.
We don't have the resources to go on a block and tell somebody what is a megawatt.
Wow.
Okay, we don't have we don't have that orientation staff, or just give orientation education to those who not in the know, who's not part of this here. That we want them to be here to understand when we use words such as megawatts.
Yeah.
So let's be, I'm just trying to keep breaking it. I'm going to continue to break it down as part of the language. How do we communicate? What is the communication for those who not on this right here?
Yeah.
How do we get out of our comfort zones to bring those most impacted and vulnerable to understand the language?
Yeah.
The language, those complications of language of what which should have, could have been for to enrich their lives. And I'm hoping that individuals on this process can start seeing with their mind's eye to how do you transition yourself to have that conversation with those who are not here, right. Those on the block who are not here for this conversation.
Those you never spoken with, those that people on this call have never met, right? Bringing
those who don't come to city council meeting.
Absolutely.
Those who don't complain, those who know there's harm to them, but nobody's listening to their understanding reality to take them to give them the comfortability, the word comfortability,
yeah,
to want to transition themselves to a next level.
Yeah.
That's what we should be talking about. How do we get a massive amount of people who are impacted and vulnerable? How do we work to take them to the next level?
Right. And Miss Margaret, I want to have that conversation now, if that's okay. And I want the panelists to also join me in that conversation, because there's no better time than now. My next question to you all, Miss Margaret, feel free to answer, or Jose, Jessica, Andres. What is the most, I'm hearing from Miss Margaret that one of the most important things we need to do is bridge the language gap.
Yep.
People don't know what kilowatts are. Folks don't know what megawatts are. Some folks don't even know what just transition is, which is why we're hosting this conversation, right? What is I'm asking a broad question, but I'm happy to have you all chime in how you all please. But my question to you all is, what is the most impactful thing that energy industrial professionals, folks on this call, can do to elevate community voices that haven't gone heard, or to help with these community needs that Ms. Margaret has outlined and many of you have outlined in your introductions?
Mm-hmm. I would like to address that. So first thing is the accessibility with languages is one thing, but the main barrier really is that a lot of this language is very inaccessible to our communities, right? Like every time I hear people speaking in acronyms, and I'm like, what the hell does that stand for? Like, everybody's speaking in code. That's the first problem right there. The second problem is then you use terms like distributed energy resources. Well, what is that? You know, in our organization, we try to simplify and make it accessible. That's why we call it local clean energy. You know, when I'm talking about, I don't even use the word equity. We just started really using that term, you know, for advocacy, but really we've been talking about how do we bring clean power to the people as opposed to it just being still about people who own and can afford it and everybody else, you know, doesn't have access, you know. So it's really about making the language accessible and really it's clearly designed not to be. And that's the first problem right there. So I'll stop with that.
Yeah. And as Andres and Jose, you're thinking, I love for folks on this call, if you're listening, I'd love for you all to use the chat box and say, what's one thing you think you can do? I think the part of this like panel is that these brilliant folks are talking, but you know, I love panels because they're an engagement and an interaction between all of us. And so if you're thinking right now about this topic and how you can be most helpful, I'd love for you to put it in the chat box so other folks can hear what you think is beneficial. Maybe they'll have some similarities there. So Jose, Andres, Miss Margaret.
Yeah, well, I'll weigh in real quickly. Is that, I mean, there's so much that people can do, you know, in this profession. Part of it is not accepting the existing structure of the so-called profession. That if you're really looking for revolutionary change, you have to understand that the existing structures are designed to enrich, you know, a minority of people. And that, you know, this has to be taken out of the realm of private control. It needs to be, you know, moved to public control. One of the things we, you know, have elevated to a discussion in a place like Richmond is as people move over to electrical vehicles, right, is who's going to own the charging stations? If the city is giving permits to private companies, they're going to profit off of, you know, providing the charge. That's just, you know, fomenting more capitalism. This should be a public resource. PG&E should be a public resource. It should not be a private company. It's only when we move towards more of a democratic socialist type of economy and politics are we going to start to get a modicum of justice. And I have a whole rant on how the Constitution is the biggest impediment to democracy, and I'll save that for another day. But I think yeah, for this discussion about, you know, energy professionals is once again is rethinking what the so-called industry is and blowing it up so that it's not just a replication of what existed before. So just transition for closing down a refinery doesn't mean that, you know, the people who are running Chevron now get to control the renewable energy sector. It needs to be taken away from them, and it needs to be transferred back into smaller divisions of people with greater democratic control. And that way the prices are not going to be so exorbitant because it's not motivated by profit, it's motivated by service. And I think it's only then will we get these excessive consumption and excessive production that leads to waste and environmental degradation, are we going to be able to turn that ship around.
Thank you. Jose, Miss Margaret, I see your hand raised.
But Igor had his hand up also. Okay, I'm just gonna put this out here. Those who are on this panel or part of this Zoom need to start the practice of bringing those who are the most vulnerable and impacted to meetings, gatherings, to talk about their experiences about the issue of the environment, air, water, or soil. And one of the problems is that there need to be ongoing orientation and education. How do you do that? And that is a resource that was not being funded to make sure those who are living to being disproportionately impacted have a pathway to understanding how to be engaged. And one of the things that I have found out over the years, if that is not a organized effort from multiple organizations, NGOs, institutes, it does not happen. It will not happen. So one of the things that has to happen at the end of the day for this process, what is the ability to support that effort and multiple geographic communities throughout the 9 Bay Area County to ensure that those who are impacted are being vulnerable have the orientation. As of right now, we do not have a systematic process to do those things.
Well said. And Jose, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of good stuff has been said. Um, want to hone in on resources, right? I think that's an important point. Communities need resources. They need resources to participate. They need resources to have capacity, right? In order to get different voices in the room, right? It's important for energy industry professionals to, to kind of put their resources there in order to ensure that folks can kind of set their time aside. Otherwise, it's very difficult for people to do that, right? Andres touched upon the capitalist system, right? And I think that's, a big reason why a lot of folks, right, can't participate, as even if they'd like to. It's hard to set time aside when you're just trying to survive. So I think that's just something to consider. And even then, right, I see a lot of questions, and I'm not going to address them directly, but I think there's obviously folks who I can see, right, are trying to find the nuance in what some folks are saying insofar as, racial dynamics or capitalist dynamics, especially for folks that, are used to being around, other folks that are looking at this problem and trying to solve it now, right? I get the inclination to want to look at the market and approach it from a perspective of, well, climate change and these things are happening today, right? So we got to do something today because it feels like dismantling capitalism is going to take a long time. And, in some degree, that's a fair point. But I think that the issue is that often a lot of folks stop at, I'm just going to accept the status quo. I'm just going to accept capitalism for what it is and don't ask bigger questions on, if not destroy it, at least how to transition out of it. At least, Andres mentioned democratic socialism. Ms. Margaret's mentioning resources. Jessica's mentioning local clean energy, right? There's different approaches to make these things that we have. And all these folks on the call understand, right, the status quo and how hard it is to break. But I think until you start asking these questions and being deliberate about it, right, it's going to be hard for folks to do an impactful thing. I mean, just to put some, and just a question, right, is, how many worker co-op kind of Tesla-like companies do we have out there, right? And I know the resources are there to form those kind of companies, right? So kind of why haven't folks even made that leap, right? And that's not completely dismantling, right, capitalism, right? But there's just elements that folks can be thinking, outside the box of that I think would be welcome, right? And I'm guilty of that as well. I'm not innocent, right? I'm trying my best to, in my new role, to really reach out to the community, provide resources. But on the other end, right, one other thing I want to mention is, now being on the, the industry professional side, working on building electrification, there's also a lot of folks are going to want, some accountability, repairing harm, that rebuilding trust, right? And that's the hard part, right? Because even I know I've seen some good allies on this call that are often like, what do you need? I'll give you what you need to participate. And there's frustration, right? Because you feel like you're doing what you need to do, but sometimes it's a process, right? That takes time to build trust with the community. And I know time is not what we don't have time, so it's a difficult thing to navigate. But I do want to put that out there.
Wonderful. You all are talking about so many things I did not prepare questions for that I have to ask you, because we cannot have this panel go and the viewers go without touching on these values that I'm hearing. So I heard a couple of things from you all. We can talk about equity in a minute, but I hear two words that I think I hear oftentimes that I feel like in terms of communication, not a lot of people know what others know what they mean. So I'm going to mention this. Jose, you mentioned accountability. This is a country where accountability has been a hard conversation, and a value to live up to, frankly. Some would say that, when you do something bad, accountability is going to jail or prison, right? Others will say, well, that's not necessarily accountability, just to put the issue under the rug, or 100 miles, Central California. I also heard resources, and I think that it's really important to name what I'm hearing, because I think everybody's hearing them and saying, okay, what does accountability look like? What are the resources that need to be brought to these communities? And those are my two questions for you all, actually, the panelists. What is accountability when it comes to the just transition? You've talked a little bit about it, but I want to specifically ask you, what does that look like to you? And then my second follow-up question to that, or you can answer one or the other, is what are the resources that need to come to these communities to show and demonstrate in action, not in words, a just transition? So again, my question, what does accountability look like in a just transition? And what are the resources that need to come to these communities in a just transition?
Well, I'll start with the notion that if you're going to have a just transition away from extractive economies, then by definition, you need to have democratic, society and principles in action. The United States does not have that. The United States is a republic with some democratic features. So we are not a democracy. So as soon as people understand that, then that allows us to move forward. A big part of it is, in Richmond, we created the Richmond Progressive Alliance as a way to challenge a Republican Party dominated economy operated by a bunch of Democrats. And the idea was local elections are nonpartisan elections by definition, but if you create a partisan brand, then people will have a choice to make, because until creating a progressive alternative, most people just voted for whoever was being sponsored by the corporations because they got more mail in the box. And so the accountability that we've had to build over 15, 16 years just to achieve a working majority is one where people who vote the wrong way, even if they're in your group, you take them out. People who vote the wrong way, if they're part of the establishment, regardless of their race, their gender, any of those kind of things, you take them out, because they're the people who are selling out your community, selling your people's lives down the drain for some chump change. And that means challenging, like in the case of Richmond, not just Chevron, but also the people who support Chevron in the broader political economy that has been exploiting and destroying our people for close to a century. So, if you're going to engage in electoral politics, which is the first step, it means you cannot give people a pass when they vote against you. you have to take them out at the next election. And the only way that's going to happen is if we, the individual people who are the advocates and the community members we work with, become the candidates to challenge these professional elected officials. And so that's one piece of it. And a big part of that is about the money, because the a municipal budget, like in Richmond, is $125 million a year business.
Oh,
And so if you're going to be running that business, you better run it right. So that means take the money away from the police department and start putting it into some other human sources, resources. Some people don't dig it, but you know what? If it comes down to elections, we will out organize them. We will take them out. We don't care who they are, race, color, class, whatever, because we have people in all ethnicities, all races, all genders that are selling our people out to this day in Richmond. And so we have a very conflicted and divided community. But I would rather have that with a lot of engaged people than people just sitting back and allowing the status quo to go by, where people get screwed over and everybody's saying, well, that's just the way it is, or twiddling their thumbs, thinking about what they're going to do about it or talking about it instead of getting out there and taking action.
wonderful. And as the rest of the panelists are going to chime in, I do want to just make sure that folks know that we are going to get to your questions. I know I had a number of questions. I was just so excited to talk to these panelists. I am going to get to your questions. You can feel free to ask your questions in the chat box. We are also taking roll and stack of some of the previous questions that have been had. So any other panelists want to chime in on accountability or what resources look like in communities that energy professionals can support or give directly?
Yeah, I want to speak to that. So, just to be clear, like the work that I do is hardly resourced. I'll put it that way. I struggle to get funding to do what we do.
No.
And that's really where I'm at right now. And then that determines to what extent we can work. Like at Local Clean Energy Alliance, the majority is all volunteers. There's only two part-time staff, myself and another woman named Cheda. Okay, so we're doing what we can with very little resources. That's the first thing. The second thing is, yes, we need to engage a lot more community on these issues. We call that energy democracy.
Yeah.
We have to organize. And I want to really emphasize when we helped establish and advocated for East Bay Community Energy as a community choice program for the East Bay, a lot of folks thought, well, we're done. We have a program. Let's move on. And it's like, no, the real work is in implementing the very policies that you get adopted. I've been doing this for like 5, 6 years now, and it's a fight. Last year, we fought our community choice program from taking nuclear energy, and that required all hands on deck, mobilizing people, because that was not the type of clean energy future we were advocating for through community choice. And community choice's promise from the beginning was clean energy, right? So the other thing is in the deployment of investments, we have to fight to get more money to reach our communities. We have to fight to reinstate, like recently, community innovation grants as part of our local development business plan. And it was going to be the second year that East Bay Community Energy was not going to offer them. And we said, hold up. The whole point of that is to fund community projects so that communities can have access to the funding that they need to deploy projects and organize around clean energy that they want to from the ground up. I was not going to have them take that away, right? So, there's just so much more work to be done when it comes to implementation. Talk about accountability, right? A community choice program wanting to use nuclear energy. And that speaks for itself right there. So there's a lot of work to be done when it comes to, organizing. And then, I want to acknowledge what Ms. Margaret said. Yes, we need to do a lot more to include the very communities that we're talking about here. And I'm struggling with getting the resources to be able to do that, because it's going to take more than just me and one other staff person. I need a whole staff to make that happen.
Yeah. Sounds like to me you deserve it at this point. We love your leadership, and thank you, Jessica, for that. That was I got goosebumps actually from what you said. So I really appreciate hearing that perspective. Miss Margaret, I see your hand raised, but I'm waiting for you to chime in.
Okay, I want to chime in that most of the progressive efforts that shape and involve in the politics of progressive politics are not very including. So let's start right there. They are not those efforts are not in those most Black, Asian, brown, red, poor white communities to be able to develop structures that are supportive of their leadership being engaged in the process. And one of the missing links here that we got to talk about, how those so-called progressive entities, progressive processes, progressive projects and programs lack the ability to pull in those others. And that's got to be put on the table here, because if we start looking at the progressive organizations, who is sitting there, who is engaged, who knocking on the doors, who is putting out the literature, who is at the conferences, who is at the city hall, all those things have to be, we got to start re-examining.
Yeah.
We have to really start examining. And yes, we got a lot of people doing a lot of work, but who is engaged, especially in the Bay Area?
Yeah.
It's not totally Black, brown, Asian, yellow, and poor people. It's mostly young white people who out there on the streets. And how do we develop the mechanisms to pull in those communities who are most vulnerable or impacted?
Right.
To be not be just a participant, but also be part of the leadership. And a good example, we got all this fanfare right now about the white football player who just told everybody that he was gay. But what happened when Colin Kaepernick wanted to talk about racial justice and just bend down and on the knee? How he got just ostracized. There's still this differences inside of what is progressive and embracing others. We could do all that talking, but how do we start capturing and bring the others to be part of the process, not only just the process, but part of the leadership?
Yeah.
So we can talk about all those things about what matters, but at the same time, we're not talking about how to be more including and embracing.
Yeah. And Miss Margaret, I hear you say specifically, we're not talking about the community needs. We're not talking about people's direct needs and direct services, what they need. We're talking about mostly what the probably investor-owned utilities need, right? I mean, oftentimes the conversation around energy and environment is started by the corporations and industry. And I want, of course, Jose, I want you to chime in. I do have a broader question. It's actually one from the community online here, which it kind of goes to what you all are talking about just kind of what our community needs are, what our goals are, and how we meet them. And right now, you know, the elephant in the room, maybe it's not an elephant, but for some it may be, is PG&E and investor-owned utilities. And they're, you can call it an oligarchy, monopoly, terrorism, some folks may say, on people. But it's also about how we align, right? This idea of how we transform this PG&E and other investor-owned utilities generally into a model, right, aligned with our community goals. How do we do that? How do we? It's almost like a gap question, but how do we transform PG&E and investor-owned utilities into a model aligned with our community needs and goals if we transform them?
Okay, but you also got just what Jessica just said earlier. She has she and another person part-time staff.
Yep.
Who are doing this fighting.
Wow.
How, the what, the who, the how, the where, and the when, are they able to go out to deep East Oakland and recruit? Where is that ability at?
Mm. So recruitment.
Recruitment for orientation and education. Where is that alliance to say that has to happen in deep East Oakland or deep West Oakland to support them when they go to the energy meetings? What is the shaping and the framing of that structure to be out on that block, be on those blocks?
Right.
That's the things I want to hear.
Right. Recruitment, orientation, and education. Is that what you said, Miss Margaret?
Yes, I did.
Thank you.
And so I would say all of that is possible if you no longer allow PG&E to be a shareholder-owned company, make it a public utility, and then use what would otherwise be shareholder profits and redirect that towards the community-based groups that are actually working in advocacy and organizing in these communities. I mean, because for us to hold our hands out and try to get money out of foundations, it all depends on what flavor of the month it is on your issue.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really got to be about how do we provide for a steady development of people who are going to go out and educate and inform the community. Jessica and one other person should not be the Oakland crew. Oakland needs to have hundreds of people going out into the community working on this, hundreds of people working on other issues. And the only way that money is going to come is if you take it away from the shareholder profits by not allowing them to be shareholder owned.
Yeah, I could
Jose,
jump in. Yeah. Building off what everyone has said, so this is not in place of, this is in addition to, right, what Ms. Margaret and Andres and everyone has said. But I think I see some questions in terms of like the policy design, right? Maybe some publicly owned utilities that haven't been the best actors, right? Or CCAs, right? And so the examples of like, even if we were to move beyond an investor-owned utility, like we've seen, public examples of not maybe the best actors. And that's a hard question. But I think the way I perceive power right now in terms of energy is, I think that's why linking kind of what we've said already in terms of like energy democracy and taking not just clean and renewable energy as an opportunity to address climate change, which is important, but also as an opportunity to kind of restructure, right, how these systems work, right, and make them more equitable, right? And what does that look like? When I was at SEHA, we put a CCA best practices report that tried to take that on. I'm not saying that's the answer, right? But I think the idea there was to balance state and regional power, right, and kind of have community voices in both, right, in order to kind of have there be a check and balance, right? I think there is an element of too much power focused in one area can then lead to someone abusing it, right? So it could be a statewide POU, a couple statewide POUs and CCAs. It could be you know, a combination of different things that exist now, some hybrids, right? But I think one of the key pieces that I've seen would probably help, generate more equitable and environmentally justice kind of policies is some sort of decentralized element, right, that allows people to be autonomous but not disconnected, which is the piece that I think sometimes we miss. Is like there has to be a way to distribute the social costs, right, and ensure that people aren't kind of disconnecting from the grid and then just have the wealthy kind of mansions and disconnecting from the grid, but a way to kind of have everyone connected and still give folks the ability to survive without depending on someone. But I will say, like, I think a question that's in the back of my mind about on as far as this is, sometimes I think we still have to kind of ask these questions with the community, because
Yeah.
who wants to be engaged on energy issues, right? Once they actually know about it, right? It's not going to be 100% of people, right? More than there is now, right? And I think that's the point that they're making on the panel, right? But I think we need to get to that point where the folks who want to be involved are involved and are redesigning these institutions, right, in a way that we can kind of create policy designs that empower people that are the most vulnerable to kind of push those decisions to be more just. And I think that's how I see kind of how you transform, right, a PG&E and an IOU
Yeah.
system.
Thank you. I want to make sure folks on the call are with me because I'm energized. And I do see a lot of chat box interaction and questions and comments, but I really want to make sure folks hear what these panelists are saying. With that, I am taking notes on just so everybody knows, but I'm hearing a huge need around resources for recruitment, orientation, and education. I heard someone say, bring people to these meetings. In a pre-COVID world, and certainly in a post-COVID world, that may even mean grabbing someone's hand with consent, if you can, preferably, and bringing them to a meeting with you and saying, hey, I'm here. Do you have any questions? How can I help you? Right? But also orientation, making sure before and after that meeting, they understand what they're joining or what they're a part of or the bigger picture. A lot of people just bring people to things, right? And don't have that pre and post orientation, that time of a one-on-one to say, here's the activities that we're doing and here's what we're trying to build together as a community. Would you like to be a part of it? Would you like to continue staying involved? How can I support you being involved in this? Right. And then the last part is education. And we talked a little bit about it here as well, right? This kind of vocabulary that some of us kind of move quickly with, and some of us are sometimes even pressured to move quickly with, right? Capitalism relies on quickness sometimes in terms of language, and the ideas of abbreviations sometimes would make you feel smarter in a room, right? But that education piece is a very important piece, supplement to recruitment and orientation, because it allows for a shared understanding of our common goals, right? Our common values and what opportunities and possibly even threats are ahead of us as we fight for a clean energy future and a just transition. I know we have, oh, I'm sorry, Jessica, were you going to say something?
That
Oh,
was me.
I know we have some time. I want to continue to get to your questions because we have about 10 minutes left. My next question is about solar. There's someone who asked about solar. Solar is becoming cheaper by the kilowatt. For those of you who were at the beginning, we did talk a little bit about kilowatts, but this question is about how consumers are not benefiting from solar getting cheaper. What strategies are being used to make solar more accessible to low income households?
Mhm. Great question.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like I think about like the Soma project. That's not something that we're working on, but I don't know if anybody here can speak to that. Um, yeah, definitely. I mean, what we've been doing is really just advocating in general about being able to reach people who are traditionally shut out of the clean energy economy, and that includes renters, and just being really intentional about who has a stake in energy, right? Where it's like kind of breaking down, for example, disabled community, huge stake in energy. If we don't have access to energy, that means we don't have access to life-saving equipment to live, right? And so that's an example. Or even, recognizing that unhoused people also have a stake in energy. I had a brother who was homeless. He had a cell phone all the time, and that's how he communicated with us. Was accessing Wi-Fi and text messaging through Wi-Fi whenever he was at a public place that had Wi-Fi, and so he needed to charge up his cell phone. Having and just really breaking down like who has a stake in energy and how do they use it, because it's beyond that homeowner, that person who has that, that money for that, right? And another thing that we've been advocating for is using like on bill financing, where we use the credit that we save in our bill to pay for whatever, energy efficiency or solar system, for example. Our communities do not have upfront money. Our communities do not have credit ratings to go take out loans, right? And so, how are we making this accessible to people who do not fit in that box? And so, we're really trying to think about ways and being able to be descriptive of that, through our local community choice program, because that's not who they're thinking of when they think of, access. And we have to push this agenda when it comes to equity. So,
Yeah, I mean, I'll add, yeah, Jessica, I think I'll add and say that what Jessica said on bill is definitely correct, right? In terms of figuring out tariff on bill or different approaches to ensure that upfront costs are in the challenge is I think is a big one. I also think that, this question, at least for me, um, is good insofar as like it puts kind of the energy industry in perspective, right? In terms of opportunities, right? Some obstacles, some mistakes that have been made, right? And then I think, I honestly believe a lot of folks were trying their best, right? Maybe I'm too optimistic, right? And I think some folks on the panel would disagree with that maybe, but at least for me, that being said, um, there's room, right, to call people in, right, and hopefully on this issue, and I think the industry can definitely take initiative to micro target communities that need it most and create those kind of systems, those financing systems that enable. I mean, short of giving it away, I get that, that the political will at this point, right, in a year doesn't seem likely, where you can kind of get the billions of dollars you need to create like a holistic resilience home. Maybe 5 years from now, maybe 10 years from now, that feels real, and I know a lot of folks that are working on that. But until then, right, until we have the political will to make those kind of big investments in disadvantaged communities, EJ communities, low-income communities, I think there are, right, some folks in the industry that can maybe take that initiative, right, outside of the SOMA programs, right? Those are great programs, but they're limited in funding, to really micro-target and prioritize these communities, right, both in hiring, both in like marketing, right, both in how they talk to folks, right, getting folks that are aware of how to speak to these communities, right, can build trust, or you can have CPOs and actors. Soma has a good model on how I think to start kind of building that kind of trust, right, and that's the solar and multifamily affordable housing program. Sorry, and but that's that's not an unlimited pot of funding. So I think this is where industry in every sector of energy can kind of really take the lead and think about how to bridge that gap, because folks notice, right, and that they're not getting these technologies, and then it becomes a challenge for folks to be excited about clean energy, because it's not in their communities, or because it's not paying well enough, right? So these are things that I think the industry has to reckon with. I think initially, when you look at the economics, I can see why when a technology is new, it might be difficult to kind of compete with the oil industry and the gas industry. But once an industry is established, it's time to kind of make those sacrifices, which the oil and gas industry recognize. Their partnership with labor has gotten them a long way, right? And unions, I respect unions, right, and their role in our society. And it's as much as sometimes, right, from the clean energy and the environmental justice side is difficult to kind of take that they're not working with us because they're part of our communities. It's hard when we don't have an alternative to kind of put forth, right? And I think that's the big piece of just transition. How can we start building that? Because I know it's not an easy thing to do, but I think the faster we can build something that's pays well, is getting to the right communities, the better it will be for a lot of us to kind of move the energy industry forward in a way we would like to see it move.
Well said. I'm going to keep us to time because I know there are so many things that we can talk about. I have one more question, but I also want to make sure that we have some concluding thoughts from panelists. Andres, I know you have a hard stop at 6:30, so I'm going to ask this question. Feel free to answer it, or also feel free to add your concluding thoughts. But how are you all, how can we address the environmental destruction burdening indigenous communities in the global South? Because of mineral and metal extraction like lithium and cobalt and nickel, to build clean energy tech? How can we address environmental destruction for indigenous communities?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not an expert on that by any means, but one thing I can say is that what is going on now is worse for indigenous people all over the world. And we've seen recently, a lot of people got excited about Marathon Refinery and Martinez closing down, and Phillips 66 announcing they plan on closing their San Luis Obispo front end of the refinery and converting, Rodeo to renewable energy. But, the more research we find on that is that it's really just keeping the internal combustion engine alive with this tax subsidized renewable diesel product, which will not only deplete more of the Oglala aquifer because of expanded corn production, but also more rainforest destruction where they're planting soybeans in rainforest. So neither one of those are viable options. And, in terms of like the precious metals, one thing we see is that we tremendously waste materials. The whole plastics in the ocean thing, that should be paid for, cleaned up by the oil companies who first produced that product, and slung it on the people. So, I mean, I think there's, I don't know that there's a simple solution, and that technology, if we rely on technology other than subsistence farming at the local level, I mean, there's always going to be some kind of trade-offs, but the interests of the indigenous local people need to be put first, because that's the first thing that's lost in colonialism. And so the environmental injustice we see in places like Richmond and West Oakland and East Oakland are just an extension of colonialism and the exploitation of the land and the people who are here or brought here to be the servants. So I think that, we really have to have very serious conversations about how are we going to make this technological transfer, and there's no guarantee it's going to be successful. But I think the COVID pandemic is an important lesson that those who suffer already are ultimately going to suffer the most when these kind of natural catastrophes occur. And that means when we move towards renewable energy, we have to really repair the damage that's been done through the non-renewable energy.
Thank you, Andres. And for those of you who don't know, it's Andres's birthday today. He is a
Happy birthday, Andres.
21-year-old.
You ain't 21 again.
Andres, happy birthday. Thank you so much for joining us. You are absolutely incredible. And it's so great to hear your thoughts.
But I would like to add, we are not in position to be able to strategize and plan for long term based on resources that we have available. It's all about a short-term process. We need to be able to be in a place of planning for long-term with the ability to have multiple layers,
right,
multiple layers of process, multiple layers of how to proceed for the long term. And that has been the biggest shortcoming of the environmental justice community. We have never been able in the 50 years and my 40 plus years being engaged, not being able to have have the ability in writing to document arrangements for long-term engagement. And we have not been able to have the administration, the organizing, any of those things is what you need to be able to carry stuff forward,
Right.
from generation to generation. And that is one of the links is missing in this chain of events. And that also we are so siloed. And I think it, we don't know how, we have not been able to prepare ourselves to look at long-term adaptation and resiliency. And how do we use those levers of community engagement, orientation, education as part of that, those strategies, those long-term strategies. And we're not in places and spaces. I'm gonna say it again, places and spaces to have those, just the dialogue, the discussion, or the conversation.
Absolutely.
We have not adapted ourselves to think in those terms, because we are so siloed and so many different things when it comes down to the environment, fossil fuel, pesticides, whatever. I mean, whales, wolves, bears, the Antarctica, and refineries.
Yeah.
But what is a joint plan of action based for the long term? We have never been able to get in a place, like I said, space and place to have that dialogue, that discussion.
Yeah.
At all, because we're all over everywhere.
Yeah. And I think we need to make those spaces more. I'm so glad.
We need to, okay, I'll be 75 this year. I ain't got too many more years left. Let's be very clear. So the time that I have left, people need to understand we got to speculate on a lot of planning to ensure we have some resiliency.
Yeah.
Some resiliency. How many of these organizations have a trust fund? Is something break off tomorrow, something jump off tomorrow, or break off tomorrow? You got the ability to bring your board, somebody in to run the organization. We don't have that. We don't have the intentionality to say if something happened, we're gonna be able to pull everybody, be including everybody economically to do this.
Yeah.
So planning is not just planning to me is not just one specific thing. It's a multiple things. And at the end of the day, we got to have long-term thinking, resources, objectives, innovations, staffing, criteria, checklists, legislation,
yes,
politics, policy, health for the long term. We have nothing as today. What can we tell? How do we shape a frame and discuss what we're doing today to a 2-year-old in 20 years will be 22?
right.
What is that? Is all gonna be on what you call it, the stick, or it's gonna be on a chip? What is gonna be? We're gonna plant something at by 6 years old. We're gonna put out something in a 2-year-old's head. What is the what?
And Miss Margaret, I think you're giving a call to action to young professionals in energy right now. And thank you, because this is what this conversation is for. This is why we started it. And I think I want to thank all the panelists, Jessica, Jose, Miss Margaret, Andres, who had to leave us at 6:30. I know we're over time. I'm so sorry. This is like, if y'all want some wine, y'all can come over to my house. I'm at in Pinole right now. We can all continue the conversation. I would love to have all of you. This has been such a tremendous conversation, such an important conversation. I want to just say thank you to all of the panelists. Thank you for all of your work previous to this, but thank you for being here and explaining how we can all take a little bit of action. I have my orders, certainly, but I want to thank you for your beck and calls. And honestly, this has been so great to have. Young professionals in energy, I want to give it back to you all to write a call to action to yourselves right now based on this conversation of what you think you can do. If you feel comfortable writing that call to action in the chat box, please do that. This is how we build community. This is how we take action around recruitment and orientation and education. I am so thankful to be your moderator today. I hope that I can be in community with you again. And Stacy, I wanted to give you or Eleanor or Igor back at the podium virtually for any conclusion or concluding thoughts you all have.
Yeah, thank you so much, Devin. This has been an amazing conversation. I think we've all learned a lot, and I think there's been a lot of calls to action. We have a lot of, great ideas that people have put in the chat. We'll be sending up a follow-up email, hopefully including the panelists' contact information, if you guys are willing, so people can follow up later. But yeah, just again, wanted to thank our panelists, Andres, who had to leave early, Jessica, Jose, Ms. Margaret. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience. Thank you, Devin, for leading our panel, facilitating this conversation. You did an amazing job. You probably could have been a panelist on this too. So thank you so much for taking this role today. I also just wanted to do a couple other appreciations. Wanted to thank women in clean tech and sustainability for helping us spread the word about this event. I want to thank my co-organizers, Igor, who had to leave early, and Stacy, and the whole leadership team at Young Professionals in Energy, especially Marissa, Nora, Prachi, Emily, Jenya, and Rena. I want to thank all of the attendees. I know some folks had to leave early, but thank you for making time in your busy schedules to talk about these important issues and listen to this incredible panel. And finally, I want to thank our sponsors again, Sunrun, Sierra Club San Francisco Bay, Sierra Club Northern Alameda County Group, and the Alameda County chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby. And for some final just announcements, I want to pass the mic to Marissa to talk about some other events that YPE has coming up. And yeah, to close this out tonight.
Absolutely happy to. Thank you everyone so much for our panelists, for our organizers. It's a phenomenal event. I'm Marissa Sweeney. I'm the co-president of Young Professionals in Energy, SF Bay Area. And I just wanted to do a quick plug. I promise it'll be short, but we have a very exciting allyship and diversity, equity, and inclusion event coming up in a couple of weeks. I'm really excited. We'll be bringing Simone Hill in to do a workshop with us on allyship. I'm super excited about this event. It's one that we've been trying to plan for a while. So if you can make it on July 15th, we would love to have you. And then separately, if you're interested in getting more involved in YPE, want to plan an event, want to work on a volunteer initiative, just please reach out. We're always looking for folks to help. And I think for me, we're talking a bit about a call to action, and I've been thinking through a lot, like how can we kind of like provide a venue or a forum as YPE to get more involved in the local community, potentially roll out like an education program for folks like within the area, especially like younger, like high school students and students, because I really think, to the point, folks kind of said this today, but like, this is wonky stuff. Like, what does a DER even mean? Like, this is not stuff that comes easily, even with like several graduate degrees. So I'm super interested in something like that. And I love if folks are interested in getting involved in something like that, please reach out. I think it's something we could easily form a working committee on this year and potentially roll out in the following year. And I'd love to work on that. So this was wonderful. Thank you again, Devin. You did such a beautiful job moderating. It's not easy. And I thought you did such a great job. So thank you. Awesome. And then also, we also have a YPE scholarship that's coming up, and Eleanor put it in the chat. Please send this around. We'd love to get some more folks involved, more folks applying. We'll be sure to send a follow-up email with all these details as well, but the applications will close on June 30th. It's targeted at folks in the Bay Area who are pursuing college degrees and are interested in pursuing a career in energy. So we're really excited to roll that program out. It's been in the works for quite a while. Awesome.
Great. Again, thank you all for joining us, and yeah, we'll be sending more out afterwards. Have a wonderful evening. Yeah, we will email the links.
And in closing, I want to make a closing announcement that I'll be 75 this year, and I will have a sophisticated funk party.
Oh,
and I would get
tell us more.
I will send the information to Igor to pass out to everybody. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Great. So we'll send an invitation to Margaret's party as well.
Like I said, sophisticated folk with environmental justice.
Absolutely. Joyful
Love
warrior.
it. Thanks, Miss Margaret. Amazing.
Okay. See y'all later.